Hello, and welcome to another tutorial video for Unifield. In today's video, we want to focus on the product standard list. And this is a pretty easy function to use in Unifield. And the two main parts we want to focus on in today's video is how do you create and encode the list in Unifield, and then how do you use the list? How do you benefit from this list once you have it in Unifield? So in order to do that, we're going to now move over to Unifield and demonstrate how to create the list. So first of all, now we're in Unifield, and notice that we are in, for this particular example, we are in the coordination database for Unifield for the Bangladesh mission. Now, a product list, or sometimes called a standard list, as you probably already know, it's just a list that is a list of codes and descriptions that have been agreed on, usually by family or by main group. So it might be, for example, you could have the mission medical standard list, or at each project and coordination level, you might have smaller list like the hygiene list or the stationary standard list. So you can really create lists for a lot of different reasons. And once you create these lists and encode them in Unifield, then you'll start to see there are quite a few different locations in the software that you can load the list and benefit from having these pre-configured lists to help you create documents faster, extract information, stock levels, consumption data, etc. So with that in mind, the first part of today's video is we'll focus on how to create the list and where to find them once you've created them in the software. So to do that, we will start in the products application. And once you've loaded the products application, you'll look on the left-hand side in the modules, and you'll see the product list is the second choice from the top. And once you open this, it takes you to the home page for the product list. And this, what you're looking at now, is just the home page. So any list that you create will appear here, and then if you want to edit a list or see more details on the list, you could click on it. So in this example, you can see that we already have a Bangladesh medical standard list in the system, and if I was to open that list, I could see more of the details about it. And in this case, I can see that it's 664 items. It was created at coordination level. A small description, as mentioned, is the mission medical standard list. And here in the reference, it says this list is valid until the end of the year, so December 31st, 2020. And then all it contains is the code and the description. And if needed, you can have a comment in this column. And so this is where you would come to identify any list that already exists. And if needed, you could edit the list. But before we get into that, I want to demonstrate how to create a new list, and then we'll start to use these two lists we have to show you some of the functionalities of the list in the system. So if you want to create a new list, you would start with the New button. And it opens up a blank home page for a specific list. And starting at the top, we'll look at the options. And for the list type, currently I recommend always using the list and not using the sublist. The sublist functionality is not fully operational at this time, and you'll have better results using the list. And for the name, it really just depends on the type of list. So in our exercise, we're going to create a hygiene standard list. So I'll just call this the hygiene. And usually in the reference column, I indicate how long this list is good for and sometimes who validated it. So I'll say valid until, we'll say 6 months. September 2020. I guess in September there's only 30 days. And you can, if you would like, you could say HR co validated, etc. And this just allows you, when someone looks at this list, to give a quick reference to whether this list needs to be updated, maintained, and who to speak to, who's the owner of the list. Creation date is by default. That'll automatically be encoded by the system. And then in the next field, you have the creator. And this is pretty easy. You just indicate if you're creating this at coordination level or project level. And in our example, it's coordination. And the description often can be the same as the name, but if you need to put more details, you can. And I will just like this. Now the next option is the standard list, whether we tick this or not. And what this indicates is whether this list is for the whole mission. Do you want this list to synchronize to the other locations, so from coordination down to the projects, or do you want this to be just for your location, whether you're creating in a project or in coordination? Now please note, if you're in the project and you create a list, even if you tick this, it does not synchronize to the other locations. However, if you're in coordination, you could choose to create lists that are only for your use in coordination, like perhaps this list, the hygiene standard list. But you may also create lists that have a value to be synchronized and shared with all locations in the mission. So perhaps our other example, the medical standard list for the mission, has value for the local PMRs and the pharmacy teams, etc. And so if that was the case, then you would tick standard. And after the next synchronization, the list would synchronize to the field. So for this list, we won't synchronize because this is only for coordination. And for the warehouse fields and for the stock location, those are not active at the current time in Unifield, so you can leave those blank. They don't need to be encoded. And now you'll see that there's 3 ways to add lines to the product list. We can use the multiple lines function, the new 1 line at a time function, or the import lines. So we'll quickly review all 3, and then we'll finish with the import to put the majority of our lines in. So I am going to say 1 line at a time. I will just say soap. I want to have some soap on the list. And I'll identify the standard item. And usually this list, as you know, would be validated by the responsible department. So you could provide the codes and the descriptions to them. In this case, it's usually the admin department, but it might be the log department in your mission. And you can provide codes and descriptions, and once they chose the items that they wanted on the standard list, they would come back to you. And let's say that they want to use the washing up liquid 1 liter bottle. So you simply indicate that, and then the comment is optional. And so if you had a specific brand name, you could indicate that here, but if you don't, then you can leave the comment empty. And then you save, and then the first item is created. The other option, as you've probably seen from the internal request and field orders, etc., is you can add multiple products. And it works the same way in all locations in Unifield. And once it opens the list, for example, I am going to say I want to look at only hygiene products. So in that case, I'll load just the log items of the hygiene family, and then I'll click search. And it's going to reduce this list from about 20,000 items down to 303 potential items that meet that criteria. And let's say we wanted to have a refuse bag, 30 liters, and then a large refuse bag, 70 liters as an option. And maybe a broom with a broomstick. So if we've selected those 3 items, we review our list, and then we say yes, we're satisfied, and we click on select. And then at this stage, we click on Add Products. And you can see that it's now added the items to the list. So now we have 4 items on our list. So that's the 2 options of the 3. You can use the new button to create 1 line at a time, or you can come to the Add Multiple Products and use the different filters, and then from that stage select the different products you want to add. The third option, and probably the option you'll use more frequently, is the Import Lines function. And to do this, you should have a template on your USB library key. Oh, let me back up one step. If you were to go to your USB library and look at the Import Templates page, you would come down and you see number 5 is the products list template. So if you open that products list template, that's going to be the file you can use to create your import file that will be compatible with this part of the Unifield software. So to save time, I have already created one. This is what it looks like. So here we have the Excel file. All it requires is the product code and the description. And if you had a comment, you would enter here. And so for this example, I'm going to save my file. And I am going to then go back to the Unifield. And I'm going to choose the Import Lines function. And here, as you've probably experienced in other parts of the software, is the same functionality. I'll choose the file. And I'll navigate to the location where I've stored this file. So for me, and once you've loaded the file, you just click Import. And it'll have a progress completed bar, % completed, and you can use this button here, the update button, and it says 100% completed. And it's always good to read this information text here. It says number of imported lines, 11 of 11, ignored, 0, and lines that need to be corrected, 0. So now we know we have a good import and the status is done. And here you go. You see you have 15 lines on your list. So at this point, you have created your hygiene standard list for the coordination location. And so it's pretty simple, as you see. And if you decided you made a mistake and you realized that you needed to remove an item, so let's say, for example, we don't want the softener. It's very simple. You come over to the red X for the item you want to remove, and you click delete and say OK. And now we're down to 14 lines. And you'll notice that there's another tab here called Old Products. And this tab, this simply keeps a history of what was on the list. So if you want to review the history, maybe you need to add an item back, or you can see the changes that the owner of the list has done over time. So that's just historical purposes, and the products maintains here. Now, once we're satisfied with the list, we click on Save, and at this point, the list is finalized. You can always come back to it and be edited, and if you needed to do that, just to review, you would go to the products list, and now we have 2 lists. We have the Bangladesh medical standard list and the hygiene standard list. And you can see that this one has the box standard list selected, ticked, and it has 664 products. And this tick box indicates that this list is synchronized to all locations, while we can see that this list is not ticked, and so it is only for local use at the coordination. And if you wanted to review the list, you could always open it, and you would see all the details regarding this list. Now let's assume that you have this list, and it'd be nice to share this with the requesting department so that they can submit their list or their request to you using the proper codes and descriptions. And they can even possibly submit it to you in a soft copy so that you can create your IR with the import function. So if you wanted to share this, you have two options over here. And the first one is the product list Excel export. So if I click on that, you open the file. And when it says yes, you select. And now you can see up here, it says the hygiene standard list. And it has all the items extracted from Unifield. And this is a nice way that you can share with the various requesters and stakeholders involved, so that when they're creating their request, they can use the same information that you will have in Unifield, and it makes the import and the encoding much easier because now you're all using the same compatible data. All right, I'll close this. The other option you have on the right hand side is the product list sublist, and this is going to take it to a PDF export. So if you have a need to share this in a PDF form instead of Excel, you have the option here, and you can see it's basically just a simple overview of the list and the items contained on the list. All right. One important thing to remember about standard list or product list is that usually it's best practice to update them and review them periodically. So that's why you can see we put in the reference field kind of the valid date to when this needs to be reviewed. Unifield will not remind you automatically that the product list is up for review. It's up to the responsible user, generally the supply officer, to keep track of this information and then contact the stakeholder responsible in the different departments to review their list. And that again is where you can easily extract it using the Excel function, share it with these different stakeholders, and then they can provide the feedback. And when you have that feedback, it's very easy for you to come here to the edit function and simply add new products as we demonstrated earlier and remove products that are no longer available. So, and of course, at the product list dashboard, if you encode correctly, you can see at an overview, kind of a global view, the valid until date listed here. So you don't even have to open each product list. And there's no limit to how many lists you can encode in the system. So really you can think of the strategy for your project and your coordination and see how many lists would be beneficial, because one of the most useful parts of this functionality is that it allows the requesters to give you their requesting information with the correct codes and the correct descriptions, and it can prevent a lot of follow-up questions and dialogue between the supply department and the different requesting departments. So you may be asking, well, what is a good way that I can, if I wanted to have the different stakeholder departments create their list, especially for recurring or replenishment items that we know we're going to buy on a regular basis, then the first step is to provide them with a list of products that are possible, that are available in the system that they can choose from. And so one way you can do that to facilitate this process is if you go to the products homepage, and let's say this page is 24,000 products and codes. Of course, that's going to be too many. So let's say we wanted to, again, just do the hygiene. We want to provide the stakeholder responsible with all the potential codes they could request from. We would say we could set our filters to only show the hygiene, as I demonstrated earlier. And now you see it's 303 items. And at this point, you don't know which of these items they want to select to be on their standard list, but you can extract this entire list by going to these two little arrows and opening the action menu on the right And at the very bottom, you'll see export. And it's very important that anytime you have more than 20 items, so you can see here, it says 1 of 20 out of 303 items. So if I go back and open my window with this little arrow, I need to select this button, Export All Query Results. By selecting this, I tell it that I don't want to export only the first 20 items on the first page. I want to export all the items on the page behind it as well, so the full 303 hygiene items. And it's going to export the code, the description, all of these titles here indicate the different columns that were on the page. So when I click export, it's going to simply remove those items to an Excel file. And now I have, if I was to look, let me enable the editing. I can see here I have 303 items. So you can simply then, once you've exported this, you can delete the file, the columns that are not going to be of interest to the users or the stakeholders. And you can simply email this to them and say, here's the different codes. And they can indicate on this file what they would like to be on their standard list. And then you can use this, copy paste it into your import template, and create the list quite easily in Unifield. All right, so now that you've seen how to create the product list, let's look at a bit of the functionality of where you can use this list and how it's beneficial. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the products homepage, or the Unifield homepage, excuse me. In the first place, we might see an option to load a standard list is at the products homepage. So the products application, and if I look across my filters at the top, you'll see that one of them says a list. And if I click on the looking glass, I'll currently see the two choices that I've created. And let's say I want to load the hygiene standard list that we just created. I select it and then I hit search, and it reduces it down to the 14 items that were created on our list or selected, and then you can have an overview of what's on the list. So especially if you're a user that's not responsible for creating the list, this is a nice function that allows them to see what's on the list, just to have an overview. And it will show any price associated with that item in the list, and that's going to be the average price. So each time we purchase this item, it's going to refresh the average based on a weighted average. So the quantity we bought times the price, and it'll calculate that into the average of all the previous times we've purchased the item. So it's a good reference price, but it's not going to be an exact price, as the market always changes. All right, where else could we use it? So another option is if you go to orders and you go to internal request. And let's, for example, assume that we're going to create a new replenishment order for hygiene products. So we would have, in this case, the client would be the coordination office, category logistics, and so this should all be familiar to you. Let's say it's 2 weeks they request. And then to load a list, we have to use the add multiple functions feature. And we open that page and we go to add again. And here you see the filter for list. And if I open the looking glass, I will see that I have a hygiene standard list. If I know that I'm doing the replenishment order for items for hygiene, it should be on their validated standard list. And so I select the list and then I click search, and it'll reduce my options down to just the 14 items. And here you can either say, if they're going to buy every item, you can say everything, or perhaps they only need to replenish some of the items. So let's say these are the 4 items they are out of, the rest are okay. Then you can then click select. And for the sake of our example, we'll just say they need 10, 20, 30, and 40. And once you've added the quantity, you would simply click Add Products, and these items will appear on the IR. And at that point, the process is the same that you normally follow to validate the IR and then source it to a purchase order or to stock if you were doing a delivery of these items. And so that is one way you can use the list. Of course, if they have the standard list in a soft copy, they can email that list to you, and you can also create the import template and use the import function here to load onto the IR. So you'll start to see a couple of different ways you can work with the list function to put it on the documents. So we're going to leave the IR here because the main objective was to show you how to load the list. And we're going to go to the warehouse. So I'll start back at the home page and I'll go to the warehouse application. Now this next example I find to be one of the most useful for the medical team, the warehouse team in the supply department, because when you have a list of medical items encoded in Unifield, it allows you to extract your inventory to not only see the items you have in stock, but to also see the items that you don't have in stock. And as you're probably already aware, currently, if you export the inventory level, Unifield only shows you what is in stock. It shows you your positive stock. Like you're asking, what's my inventory level? It says you have this code, this description, this quantity. However, sometimes it's nice to be able to see the items you should have, but you don't. So you have a rupture, you're out of stock. So if you configure in Unifield a standard list, then you can use that list to see these zero stock items or these ruptured items. So to do that, you would come to the export inventory level. And then once that opens, you would come to the new. And we want to generate a new export. And so this is probably familiar to most of you, but the new part of the function is this filter here for product list. And if we click on the looking glass, you can see we'll load the medical standard list for Bangladesh for this example. And in this case, we also want to look just in the MedStock location. And so when we do that, we're going to leave the rest of the filters blank, and we're going to generate the report. And it gives you this nice message here. Your file is now ready to download it at the right sidebar. You come over to this link on the top right, and you select it. And it launches your Excel. And you say yes. And as you've probably heard me say in several videos, I like to put in the filters so that I can manipulate the data how I like. And just as a refresher, in case you don't recall, the blue lines that have the blue purple color are the total quantity. So you have the total quantity, and the white lines indicate the batch, expiry date, and quantity for that batch. Now, a better way to see this example is if we look at the next item, we can see that it is for dexamethasone, and we have 38 quantity. But that 38 quantity is part of 2 batches, so 20 and 18. So that's the difference between the white lines and the purple blue lines. But what I'm interested in now, as we discussed, is I would like to see my zero stock levels if I'm out of anything that I expect I should have. And to do that, I come to the total quantity column H, and I deselect everything and say, show me the zero stock levels. And I say, okay. And now I can see that I have, from my standard list, I have 11 items that I don't have quantity in my medical stock. And I have the information here. So this can be one of the really beneficial ways that the medical team, the pharma, PMR, Medco, maybe the warehouse team and the supply department can see their zero stock levels in Unifield. And so again, and then once you come back, as you know, that report always saves here on the export inventory level kind of home page. You can see that it was we loaded a standard list, stock location med, and if you ever wanted to look at that again, you would simply open that window and the file remains here that you can launch for historical reasons. So there are many examples in Unifield, or many locations, that you can use the list function. I'm not going to review all of them in this video because there are quite a few. But as you navigate through the software, you'll start to see the list filter like we did. I'll go back to products. And when you see this list filter option, as you see here, that indicates that you can load a pre-configured list for whatever function. It could be the inventory, the internal request, field orders, it could be the monthly consumption reports, etc. There are quite a few locations that allow you to load the pre-configured list into this to help generate the information you're looking for. So hopefully this video gives you some insight into the benefits of the list, how to create it, where to utilize it. And just remember that you have the option of creating a standard list that synchronizes to all locations in the mission, or you have the option, if you're at the project level or coordination, to create just a local list that's only for your use and does not synchronize. So depending on the strategy and the need for the list, then you can choose the best way to create that. And as always, if you need more information, you can go to your Unifield USB library, the Unifield manual, folder number 2, and products, chapter 3. And if you select Control F and type list, it will take you to the product list chapter, which has more details that go along with this video of how to create the list and update a list, export the information, etc. I hope you found this video useful, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me and we can review this information via phone call. All right, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time.